Hi guys, hope you're well. So a friend of mine just sent me a video which shows seems like a pretty well-educated guy talking about the body and coronavirus and diet, and basically saying like your diet may be enough to prevent you getting infected. And he seems articulate, he seems clever, and the way he's used certain words would understandably result in people thinking he knows what he's talking about and he's telling the truth. So he's using some fancy like immunology words and trying to explain what they are to a news crew. I don't even know who the news source is. Looks like they're somewhere in America, but it doesn't look like any on the microphone doesn't seem like any news outlet I've ever seen, so I don't know how reliable that is in its own instance. But I just wanted to go through the different parts he was talking about in the video and show you the video. I'll probably download it and put it up, and then basically talk about what he's trying to explain and why he's biasing his argument towards himself. Instead of providing an unbiased review of the science, he's trying to twist it to fit his agenda. So like I said, he seems pretty educated. I think he might have gone to medical school, but by the looks of it now, he seems like he's a holistic doctor, basically natural remedies. Whilst obviously a good diet and looking after yourself with a good diet and good lifestyle is crucially important for chronic diseases, it's not the be-all and end-all, and sometimes pharmaceuticals are required. Obviously in America, there is this some form of disdain towards government or government-owned healthcare because it's not here. All doctors are private here, so you have to get private insurance. Where obviously, if you're in the UK, the NHS I believe is owned by the government. So, and obviously, it's fantastic. So, I wanted to break down his arguments, find the obvious loopholes in them, but also talk about some of the interesting parts that he thinks are important. And I think there are definitely some points I can agree with him on, and I think that's important to note. So, I'm not just going to totally on him. There are some points I'll appreciate and talk about in terms of what he said, but they're also widely available. They're not hidden, and they're widely distributed and published on. So yeah, let's get straight into it.
So if you look at the anatomy of a virus, it's RNA, and then it's encapsulated, and then it has these protein spicules around it, right? So because it had RNA, it can't make proteins, which are toxins, right? It can't make a poison, like a rattlesnake. It has no anatomy to scratch or claw or sting or bite, right? So it has no innate ability to harm people. A virus doesn't. What happens though, if it gets inside one of your cells, it can take your DNA, and so it can recreate its proteins, right? Make a lot of little babies. Makes all those babies, they come out into the bloodstream. Your immune system says, we don't like those guys, and it starts the attack.
Okay, yeah, so first of all, he provides a nice kind of metaphor to hook you in with regards to viruses, not having claws or teeth, can't produce poisons, etc. But then they become toxic when they enter the body. And the premise being that once they hijack your cells, they use your cell's own DNA to help them replicate, and then they leave the cells, and the immune system then goes, attack, and then the immune system is responsible for a lot of the sickness symptoms that you develop. So for the majority, or in the most part, that is true. So when viruses infect your cells, they basically hijack your DNA to replicate themselves. They burst as they leave, and that can kill the cell, resulting in many more viral particles in your blood, respiratory system, etc. And then other immune cells will start targeting those to say they're not a part of this system, then, which is something that's called non-endogenous, and they're pathogens, so they're infections. And then the immune system goes, let's become inflammatory and kill this virus. And that inflammatory response is responsible for a lot of the symptoms you see. One important part here that he doesn't actually highlight is that when the viruses leave the cells, they burst them and they kill them. So in many instances of viral infections, that bursting process can actually result in severe complications. So a perfect example of that is HIV. HIV, when it leaves particular immune cells in your body, kills your immune cells to the point that your white blood cell count becomes really diminished. And that means someone with AIDS, which is, so HIV is human immunodeficiency virus, AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, which is basically late stage HIV. That is when the number of your immune cells in your body are massively reduced, making you prone to infection from other causes, such as bacterial lung infections and other viral infections, for example. So mostly true, interesting points, and a nice little metaphor to kind of get you hooked into his argument.
Right, a two-prong attack with your T cells, the macrophages, and then with also these things that are called cytokines with your immune system weapons of mass destruction, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes you sick, right? The immune system response. The virus itself has no capabilities, right?
So yeah, again, just emphasizing here, he's saying that the virus has no capabilities itself of causing damage, but I mean, like I said, with that HIV example, that isn't technically true because it can indirectly cause secondary infections with other viruses and bacteria. What I also will note, he starts talking about inflammatory mediators. If you ever see any public health official on the news, they don't start talking about the ins and outs of inflammatory molecules because being honest, not many people are going to know what they are. So, for example, he starts talking about cytokines. There are hundreds of cytokines, which are basically inflammatory molecules that immune cells release. And he starts talking about different immune cell types, so lymphocytes, macrophages, and T cells. Again, they're parts of innate and adaptive immunity, but you don't hear about those on news reports because it's a very complicated process. So throwing out complicated jargon can, in my opinion, I think the public will be more likely to go, oh yeah, he knows his stuff because he's saying words that I don't understand. But he's using it in a context to kind of twist your opinion of his approach. So for example, I could sit here and talk, say, cytokines are one type of molecule involved in inflammation. But you've got chemokines, you've got prostaglandins, you've got complement, you've got lipoxins, you've got pro-resolving mediators. I can talk about all this stuff and people will be like, what is that? What are these things? But I don't, because it doesn't make any sense to do that. The only time it is a good idea to do that is if someone actually raises that question. So he's kind of muddying the water from the get-go.
So, we've been on the earth for a long time. Viruses are not new. They've been here for billions of years like we have. How have we survived viruses all of these years? Coronavirus is not new. What we have in our bodies are an innate system of mechanisms that protect us, right? So vitamin A, right, that you get from your green vegetables and so forth. Vitamin A is actually a hormone that allows you to produce what's called cytokeratin. So cytokeratin is like these little heart proteins of your hair, skin, nails. That's what keratin is, right? Horns, right?
Yep.
Vitamin A makes you create a protective barrier around your cells so that when you eat lots of, dark green vegetables, right, and yellow and purple and those things, you got that force field, right? So the virus can't get in, then it can't multiply. It can be out here all day long, right? It's like a pit bull in the yard that's chained up, can't bother you, right?
Okay, so from here on, he goes to say, viruses have been around for millions of years, and that's true. They've been around far longer than we have. And he's basically putting forward the idea that we've got, what happens to us prior to coronavirus and in terms of infection. Like, we have this natural defense system which provides protection. And I mean, again, this isn't what scientists aren't going, oh, your immune system is crap. It's saying that, it's not primed to protect you against something it's not been exposed to before. If he would have actually started listing off different cell types in more detail, for example, memory cells are developed by the immune system upon exposure to that infection before. And it basically works as a memory bank. And that way it worked out how to fight it before. And if it's exposed to it again, it can go, I can kill this before it causes any symptoms. That's basically what your immune system can do. And it's an incredible resource in that regard. But he's saying coronavirus isn't like the only virus that causes issues, but he's kind of putting it in the way that other viral infections previously, or other infections generally, we've been able to fight off. But let's look back at Spanish flu. Spanish flu, I think, was 1912. It killed like 60 million people. So I think it might have even been more than that. Don't quote me on the numbers, but it was a lot. Clearly our immune system wasn't particularly primed for that, and you also need to keep in mind our medical system wasn't particularly good then, let's say. But then you've got other examples when you go back to centuries before that, when you're looking at bacterial infections, such I think bubonic plague is a bacteria, but yeah, bubonic plague, so the Black Death, definitely not a virus, which killed like a third of Europe's population. So the immune system is fantastic, but it's not a be-all and end-all, and sometimes it does need some form of support and supplementation. So, for example, he then starts talking about vitamin A. And vitamin A, he basically puts forward the idea that vitamin A alone is enough to prevent viruses from infecting you. That's just not true. Having a healthy diet is absolutely essential. It should be the pinnacle on your list of things to do to protect your health before looking at any supplementation or any medication. You should always be looking at your diet first. I'm a scientist. It doesn't mean I automatically go to the drugs for a quick fix. Sometimes they're particularly very helpful for various different disorders, but in terms of just looking after yourself and your health, you should primarily be looking at your diet first.
The other thing is that...
So can you get to the mask part?
Get to the mask part. So,
Yes.
so that's what I'm saying. You don't need the mask. You're already protected.
Okay, then he goes ahead and he brings out the fact that you don't need a mask. So, many people seem to think that you wearing a mask will prevent you from getting infected with a virus. And it helps, but it's not entirely true. And I've discussed this before, and scientists have discussed this on news sites. So again, it's not hidden knowledge. It's not some conspiracy. The whole point of wearing a mask is so when you cough, you're less likely to transmit your water cough droplets to someone in the near vicinity of you. So if I wear a mask, for example, and someone next to me coughs on me and who isn't wearing a mask, their water droplets from their cough can still enter my eyes. I can still get infected via that route, depending if you're English or American. So wearing a mask, if I was to wear a mask and I came up to you and I coughed on you, it's far less likely that those water droplets would get into your mouth or your nose. And I think that's really important. But if you were to wear a mask yourself, then if I was to cough on you, the only real way you're probably going to get infected if it was to get through your eyes. But you are still likely to get infected by that method. So wearing a mask isn't necessarily about you, it's about others. It's about if you're sick and you don't know it, if you sneeze due to an allergy, but you're actually an asymptomatic carrier of the virus, so you are infected of it, but you're not expressing any symptoms, but you have like an allergic reaction, I don't know, to dust or hay fever, and you sneeze on someone, you're still able to protect that person. That's really important. So, for example, if you're getting a surgery done, would you elect to have that surgery done by a doctor who doesn't wear a face mask? The whole point of a doctor wearing a face mask in surgery is so that their respiration, so their water droplets, don't get in the open wound. And doctors can, wear these masks for up to 12 hours at a time during a really lengthy surgery. So just keep that in mind in terms of masks, and don't get your opinions twisted by misinformation regarding this.
You have these other things that we've been protected for billions of years by having vitamin A, from the carotenoids, and by having vitamin D, which is also a hormone that makes you produce cathelicidins, which normally kill viruses and so forth.
So really quickly, he brings up an interesting point about vitamin D and how vitamin D might be linked to or vitamin D deficiency might be linked to an increased risk of infections. And it does seem to be the case. And again, this is not hidden knowledge. I've done a video on it actually recently, whereby a couple of studies have shown that vitamin D deficiency seems to increase your risk of COVID-19 infection and complications. And it is one reason, not the definitive reason, but it's definitely one reason which links ethnic minority groups such as Native Indians and African Americans to be disproportionately affected by coronavirus. And that is an interesting point he does make, and I'll give him kudos to that.
So you'll notice down in places like Vietnam and Cambodia, 0 deaths. Why was that? Because they're right near the equator, right? They're soaking up all that sun, right? The other population that you didn't see get affected was the homeless. How come the homeless weren't dying in the street, right?
All right, there are two interesting points here. He talks about population and general people who don't get it. So initially he starts looking at Vietnam and places in the East and looking at their death rate associated with COVID-19. So a couple of points. Death rates in the East are considerably lower than they are in the West, and there are multiple reasons for this. So if we're looking at Asian countries specifically, he uses Vietnam, but let's look at Japan and South Korea as well. They do have deaths. I think he said that Vietnam have no deaths. I don't know as I record this, I'm going to just put a graphic up and see if that is actually true. I don't know. But it just kind of points out that you could just immediately agree with him without actually checking. But yeah, places like South Korea and Japan have a low death rate as well. China do, but they're not really the most reliable source in the world. But the reason is that Japan and South Korea put strict lockdowns in almost immediately. Everyone in the public said, that's okay, we accept that and we'll deal with it and we'll get on with our lives. And that's what's happened. If you think about it, if you've ever been traveling in the East or you've seen Asian tourists come to America or London or anywhere else in the UK or anywhere else in Europe for that matter, many Asian tourists would like to wear masks when they're on public transport. The reason for that is they do it I lived in Singapore for a year, so I've seen it firsthand. It's like they do this during the winter months specifically, just in case they have the flu and they transmit it to someone else. There is this real increased etiquette associated with other people's well-being and health that is not really seen by the same severity in the Western world. So, alongside adhering to strict lockdown rules, and they were implemented by the governments in an incredibly rapid period after the infection started to be identified, they're also very strict and tolerant of the mask mandates, and they accept them and they carry them out. But it's not just countries associated with for example, increased sun exposure. So he's talking about that vitamin D linkage to reducing your risk of getting coronavirus and dying. But you also need to look at other countries around that area that have reduced death rates. Look at New Zealand. Not exactly known for being the hottest country in the world, like not majorly on the equator, but not even on the equator at all. But their death rate is considerably smaller than every other country in the West. Why? Because they put a lockdown in place incredibly early, and they were very strict with it. In fact, they got rid of it once. I think British tourists came to the country and they had it, and they gave other people the infection, so they had to lock down again, and then they got rid of it a second time. So it just shows you the effectiveness of an early lockdown and a national mandate for masks and social distancing, and how effective they can be.
Because they're out all summer soaking up sun and getting vitamin D. Who did die? Right, so the homeless, no health care, they didn't die. Nursing home patients, 24/7 health care, they died.
Okay, so then he starts talking about the homeless people and them not dying, and people in nursing homes dying. So there is so many glaring holes wrong with this argument. So there's a lot of homeless people in the United States. They're not necessarily in their 70s. Okay, so let's put it this way: if you're a homeless person, you're outside. What's the likelihood that you're going to be exposed to people that get coronavirus? I would say relatively small. Maybe that's just my opinion, I guess. I don't actually know the statistics on homeless people that have got it. But you also need to keep in mind the following: how many homeless people without healthcare in the United States would electively go to hospital to see if they're sick, when they know full well that they can't pay for their therapy? So obviously those numbers are going to be swung. And then he compares that against nursing homes, and they've got full-round healthcare, and they're dying disproportionately to the rest of the public. But that's obvious, right? People in nursing homes are already vulnerable. On average, people in nursing homes are going to be considerably older than people that are homeless, on average. And we don't have any effective therapies for coronavirus yet. So of course it's going to affect them in a disproportionate way. Like in a video I did recently, I showed you statistics looking at influenza fatality rates versus coronavirus, and showed you like how more dangerous coronavirus is to flu. And I think at around the 70 age period, so 70 and over, it was about 15 times more likely to die from coronavirus than flu. And we already know influenza infections in people that are elderly is fatal. That's why flu shots are so widely available and often for free for the elderly community. So is it really shocking that people in nursing homes are getting disproportionately affected by this disease? No, it's not.
Right, meat packing plants, ships, anywhere where people weren't exposed to the sun and low vitamin D, African Americans, right, any ethnic minorities, right, it's harder for the sun to make us. So the mask is superfluous, right? Our bodies know how to take care of COVID and all these other viruses, right, from doing the right things. We've moved away from that, right, putting on sunscreen and that type of crap, right, and made us vulnerable, right? It's harder to produce vitamin D if you're overweight. So this lifestyle that Americans have made us a powder keg for COVID.
If the body knew how to take care of coronavirus, there wouldn't be, was it over 1 million deaths worldwide and like 250,000 deaths in the United States. That's the cold hard numbers. If the immune system was so geared for it, people wouldn't be dying of it. That's just a fact.
So you think it's
all you have to do is throw the match on.
So what we eat can eliminate this whole fear.
No question.
Wow.
What we eat and vitamin D, right? So you either got to get out in the sun between 10 and 3. You got to tan, right? Use a tanning bed, right? And take vitamin C before you do that to soak up the free radicals, or take a supplemental vitamin D.
So again, yeah, they asked the question about what you eat can eliminate the fear. So again, I will emphasize that I think this guy is a holistic doctor. I think he went to medical school and now he does holistic practice. So that's natural medicine, hence why he's pushing this idea of natural remedies. I think a natural, healthy diet is a core principle of a healthy immune system. However, if your immune system hasn't been exposed to an infection before, you don't know how that immune system is going to react. And that is a key thing that needs to be considered in terms of coronavirus and other infections too.
So, doctor, let me ask you this then. What do you make of the governor's order saying absolutely face mask health, and you are mandatory from now on until I say further, you must wear your mask? That's what the governor said.
I know, and that's his understanding, right? And from misinformation.
Okay, so I don't know what state he's in, but he's talking about the governor providing a mask mandate for coronavirus, and this guy, the news journalist said he was a doctor, which is why I think he is a holistic doctor. Says like, oh, misinformation is making him think that a mask mandate is necessary, but I mean the data shows it's necessary. Okay, especially in cities with crowded populace and busy commuter trains and coaches, buses, cars, etc. Masks help reduce spreads. This isn't political, you know. Why is it being made political? It doesn't matter if you're left wing or right wing or, you know, don't care for any form of politics. This is about health and safety of everyone. I don't care like if you are of any political persuasion. This isn't about politics. This is about your health. This is about my health. This is about the health of my family and your family. Like, what's the point of taking that risk? Eat well, wear a mask, socially distance, and look after yourselves.
And he got that information from medical doctors. What we're taught in medical school is to do things that benefit the pharmaceutical industry, right? So you're going to get told things, you know, that sell masks, right? That sell vaccines, that sell drugs, you know, for viruses and so forth. Because economically, right, that's what pays for the Porsches, you know, and the light chandeliers and that type of thing, right? Sure. But it's not what your body needs.
We're not taught I didn't go to medical school, right? So, but we're not taught like, I use drugs for research pharmacologically. I don't use particular drugs to benefit the pharmaceutical industry. It's bollocks. Like, Pfizer and Moderna at the moment are the two leaders for the coronavirus vaccine. They're going to be competing against each other to get shipment. Governments will buy it; they'll have to, but people will get it for free. This isn't coming out of your pocket. Like, there is this just massive assumption that pharmaceutical companies are bad, right? Okay, so I think if people are using that logic, if you have to take an antidepressant or like a simvastatin or something like that for high blood pressure, or schizophrenia medication or epileptic medication, or some medication that you're given like L-Dopa if you've got Parkinson's disease, or medication that you're given for arthritis or obesity or heart disease or anything else, like cataracts, like, because they're given by pharmaceutical companies, and there's this suggestion that they're the worst, why take these drugs? It's because they fucking work. That's why.
So again, Vietnam is a third world country. They had 0 deaths. What does that tell us about what we're doing, right?
Okay, so you mentioned Vietnam again, so I actually did a quick check. There's about 1,800 cases in Vietnam and 34 deaths. So, yeah, definitely people dead in Vietnam from COVID. So, don't know where he got this number from. I don't know what sort of a database he's using, if he is using one at all, or is just using word of mouth. Okay, so it's important to call people out on crap. And this is just crap. So, like I said, he has made some important points regarding diet, but he's also made a lot of twisted comments and also just utterly false statements.
Who got sick? The white guys. How come? Because they have been programmed to use sunscreen, and their vitamin D levels are tanked.
Wow. What's your whole name?
Roby Mitchell.
Roby?
Yep.
How do you spell it?
R-O-B-Y.
Mitchell?
Mitchell, MD, PhD.
Oh, I love it when they say their name at the end. Okay, so he says his name is Roby Mitchell. So I did a quick search on who this guy is. So he says he's a doctor, but he's a disgraced ex-doctor, which suggests to me that he's been stricken off. Vice have written an article about him, and he hasn't actually been allowed to practice medicine for 15 years. So this is my emphasis when you see these videos. This guy has a PhD. I have a fucking PhD. Whoopie-doo-doo. Like, the problem is that this guy he was a doctor and he's been disgraced. So he said that ketamine can cure autism. It cannot. It's fake. He's also there. So now he actually has a holistic website. So I knew that this was going to be the case. I could feel it in my bones before it came up. So, yeah, he's a holistic medicine, which is a holistic doctor, which basically says like only natural remedies work. And the reason is he's probably doing this is because he cannot actually practice pharmacological based medicine. He can't work in a doctor's clinic. He is disgraced. So that's my overall take on this. Just keep an eye out on the sort of stuff you see online. This emphasizes to me the problem with social media. Like, I'm very glad that he put his name in, and because many of these videos they won't. And all it took me was I literally put his name in to Google and it come up with all this bollocks. So just keep an eye out for all this sort of stuff, right? Generally, highly regarded and respected scientists are very selective with the news outlets that they give interviews with. And that's a key one, okay? And, you know, like this guy made some interesting points about diet and lifestyle, but that's because he's a holistic doctor, but he is a disgraced practitioner. So I want to emphasize that. A lot of bollocks in here, a lot of stuff to be careful of. And I just wanted to make this available online just to show you, like, look, videos can be littered with false information, and scientific words that are presented make it appear more legitimate, and it's just not the case. So let me know your thoughts on this. If you want me to dissect any other videos, then I'm more than happy to do that. Doesn't really take me all that long. So yeah, happy to do it. Have a good week. Whenever I upload this, I don't really know what there's going to be. And I will see you soon.